Tonight's mystery pulls you straight into the shadows, where every clue whispers and every truth hides behind another lie. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Nero Wolfe and the body in Archie's taxi. The rain had been needling the windshield for so long that by the time she slid into the back seat, I'd stopped pretending the night had any intention of cheering up. Manhattan does that after midnight, gets moody, puts on a wet shine and waits to see whether you'll slip. I didn't mind. I wasn't in uniform for Her Majesty Nero Wolfe tonight. I was driving a borrowed yellow taxi as a favour to a pal whose appendicitis had objected to another shift. I figured a few hours moonlighting might amuse me, or at least irritate Wolfe. Both prospects had merit. The woman arrived without warning, the way trouble usually does. I'd just eased the cab to a stop under the flickering awning of the Royale Theatre when she appeared through the curtain of rain, tall, wrapped in a mink-collared coat, moving with the kind of elegance that makes you instinctively check your tie knot. She didn't look at me. She floated past my shoulder into the back seat, the perfume trailing after her like she had hired it full time. "Uptown," she murmured, the voice low, cultured and tired in a way expensive people get tired. The door clicked shut behind her, and I pulled away from the curb, trying not to feel like I was chauffeuring a ghost of better days. I'm not the sentimental type, but something about her posture, straight spine, gloved hands clasped tight, gave me the impression she was either bracing for impact or deciding whether to jump. I kept my eyes on the road, which on a wet night like that took full attention, especially with the city throwing its usual tantrum. Taxis cutting angles sharper than a bookie's regret, pedestrians testing mortality, neon signs promising glamour that rarely showed up for work. Halfway up Madison, we hit a lull in traffic, the kind that lasts 3 seconds before the universe sees you relaxing and slaps you for it. I felt the shift behind me, subtle, like a sigh that forgot how to end. I glanced in the mirror and saw her head tilt to the side, her shoulder sliding down the leather in a way no refined woman ever would voluntarily. "Lady," I said, keeping one hand steady on the wheel, "if you're planning to faint, I should warn you I charge extra for dramatic passengers." She didn't answer. She didn't move. I eased the cab to the curb, rain thudding on the roof like impatient knuckles. Turning, I saw her up close, eyes half-lidded, lipstick flawless, skin pale as unprinted paper. A perfectly groomed woman, momentarily undone. And then I saw what wasn't there. No breath misting, no tremor under the coat. I reached forward and touched her wrist. Nothing. Now, I've had my share of awkward moments with women, but they typically involve misunderstandings or misplaced sarcasm. Corpses are a different league. I stared at her, the perfume still delicate, the gloves spotless, and the only thought I could muster was that the night had a grudge. The street was nearly empty, save for a pair of night owls smoking under a deli awning, watching like we were tonight's feature presentation. I stepped out and waved down the nearest beat cop, who was doing his best to stay dry under a lamppost that offered no such promise. "Officer," I said, "I've got a fare who won't be paying." He trudged over, gave the interior a glance, and let out a noise that lived somewhere between a grunt and a curse. "Dead?" "That's usually my diagnosis for people who stop breathing," I said. "But you're welcome to double-check. I don't charge extra for corpses, just kidding. I absolutely charge extra for corpses." He gave me a look, suggesting he didn't appreciate my humour or my face, but protocol trumped personality. He radioed in, then stood guard like she might bolt. While he handled that, I did what any self-respecting assistant to Nero Wolfe would do, looked for something that shouldn't be there. Her evening bag, a small pearl-white thing, sat beside her. I opened it, careful not to smudge the respectability. A compact lipstick, a silk handkerchief, and one more item, a torn taxi chit with 3 initials printed at the top. HCC. Even in the dim, rainy glow, I recognized it. Hamilton Crown Club. A social fortress where financiers and theatrical royalty clinked glasses and exchanged secrets in walnut-panelled rooms. A club with more rules than a monastery and more scandals than a tabloid. What was she doing carrying a chit from the Crown Club, and torn at that? Before I could ask her, the angels declined to intervene. A squad car arrived, then an ambulance, which didn't need to hurry. Questions came at me from all angles, but I had handled enough police spotlights to keep my story crisp. I wasn't in the mood to explain why I was driving a taxi, so I framed it as a temporary community service. The cop didn't buy it, but since being a wiseacre isn't illegal, he let it go. By 1:37 a.m., after repeating the events twice and promising not to skip town before breakfast, I was free to make the call I dreaded. Wolfe. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, 4 being his preferred number for maximum irritation. "Wolfe speaking," he said, voice thick with the annoyance of being awake at an hour he regarded as biologically offensive. "It's me," I said. "I've got an unexpected addition to the evening." "You frequently do," he replied. "If it involves combustion engines, derelict acquaintances, or impromptu gallivanting, I shall not be impressed." "It involves a passenger," I said, rather decorative until she stopped breathing in the back seat. Silence then. "Archie, if you are trifling—" "Not tonight. Dead woman, mink collar, perfume sweeter than your disposition. No marks, no bruises, nothing. She collapsed like the air decided it needed her more than we did." Wolfe exhaled, the sound like a moral judgment. "Confound you. You attract calamity the way carrion draws flies." "That's flattering," I said. "But she didn't kill herself to spite me." "Where are you?" "Still with the police. They'll keep me long enough to memorize every puddle in Manhattan. But I found something in her bag. Torn chit from the Hamilton Crown Club." Another silence, but this one thoughtful. "Do not let the police coerce you into folly," he said. "You are to return here at once when released and give me a thorough account." "You sound interested," I said. He harumphed. "I sound irritated. The distinction should be obvious." It wasn't, which meant he was interested. By the time I finally escaped the last of the questioning and handed the taxi back to my friend's cousin, the rain had given up on pretense and become a steady march. The city smelled of wet asphalt and boiled coffee. My coat weighed 5 pounds heavier, my shoes were plotting mutiny, and my mood had dropped to the sub-basement. By the time I reached the brownstone, dawn was threatening the skyline like it had a grudge, and my shoes were still remembering Madison Avenue's puddles with bitterness. Manhattan at 5 in the morning is a special brand of bleak. The street sweepers bang metal cans like they're rehearsing for a percussion solo. The milk trucks hiss by as though annoyed at delivering nourishment, and the air smells like the combined regrets of anyone still awake. I let myself in with a yawn that could have taken out a window pane, hung up my coat, and tried to convince my spine that we were on speaking terms again. The office was dark except for the lamp Wolfe always left burning low on the credenza. He claimed it conserved his eyes. I suspected it was to remind me he valued electricity more than my sleep cycle. I was peeling off my jacket when the phone rang, sharp, insistent, and timed to catch me mid-groan. I crossed to the desk before it could wake the whole block. "Goodwin," I said, preparing for the universe to continue its vendetta. "Where is Wolfe?" Inspector Kramer's voice came through the line like a gravel truck rolling over a tin roof. No greetings at that hour. He wasn't a monster. "In bed," I said, "or plotting ways to avoid getting up. Hard to tell the difference." "I need to speak with him. If you want him awake before sunrise, you'll need an act of Congress, and even then you'll face filibuster." I paused. "What's the temperature?" "Professional," Kramer grunted. "Don't get clever." "Too late. It's congenital." He exhaled in a way that suggested he'd aged a year. "Tell him this. We expect full cooperation. The DA's office is already twitchy about that woman. A corpse in the back of a taxi driven by you. It smells like trouble." "That's not fair," I said. "I've had passengers who were far more trouble while breathing." "Goodwin," he warned. "This is not a joke. I'll call again at 10. He'd better be awake. And you tell him the DA won't tolerate interference." "Interference is Wolfe's middle name," I said. "I'll pass the love note along." He hung up without ceremony. I didn't take it personally. Kramer saved his pleasantries for funerals and promotions. I trudged upstairs, showered, and attempted a shave that didn't make me look like I'd lost a brawl with a hedge. By 9 sharp, Wolfe was in the plant rooms with Theodore, fussing over orchids like they were ambassadors from a friendly nation. That meant no disturbances until 11. Orchid hours are stricter than international treaties, and ignoring them can result in sanctions known as Wolfe's Wrath. At 11:01, he descended in the elevator, filled the doorway of the office like a continent settling into place, and lowered himself into the red leather chair with a sigh that rattled the moral foundations of the building. "You look worn," he observed. "I had a little nightlife," I said. "Corpse in a taxi, cops with clipboards. Rain that wanted to drown the borough. You know, the usual. "Spare me embroidery," he said. "Report." So I did. I gave him the entire sequence from the woman's graceful entrance to her graceless demise, the beat cop, the chit from the Hamilton Crown Club, and my conversation with Kramer. Wolfe listened with that catatonic focus of his, eyelids at half-mast, head angled like he was co-signing my sentences. When I finished, he drummed his fingertips once against the polished desk, faint, deliberate, the unmistakable signal that he was hooked even if he wished he weren't. "A murder in a taxi," he said slowly, "is a barbaric misuse of public conveyance. It reflects both cowardice and contempt for civility." "That your way of saying you're worried about me?" I asked. "Confound you, your levity is intolerable." But he didn't deny it. Just then, Fritz appeared in the doorway, as noiseless as a pleasant thought. He carried my coffee and Wolfe's morning beverage on a silver tray, polished enough to shave in. Fritz set them down with his usual Swiss precision and retreated, leaving behind the faint scent of cinnamon rolls that had no business smelling that good at 11 in the morning. I took my mug. Wolfe lifted his glass, sniffed, and took a measured sip. It was the closest he came to smiling. Before either of us could resume our scheduled sparring, the doorbell rang. Fritz went to handle it, because only Fritz handles the doorbell, and returned with a man who wore his nerves like a poorly tailored suit. He was about 40, slim, hair carefully combed but fighting a losing battle with worry. His overcoat was expensive, his expression more so. He clutched a hat as though afraid it would escape. "Mr. Nero Wolfe?" he asked, voice brittle from too much fear or too little sleep. Wolfe gestured toward the red chair facing the desk. "State your name." "Philip Renard." The name pinged something faint. A Crown Club member, if memory served. Renard sat, adjusting his hat in his lap. I understand you were consulted regarding a woman who died last night." "No," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin was entangled in the matter. I'm considering whether to allow the entanglement to persist." I gave Wolfe a look. He ignored it. Renard swallowed. "I need your services." "What kind?" Wolfe asked. "Protection. Representation. His hands twitched. "I knew the woman. I saw her last night at a fundraiser at the Hamilton Crown Club." Wolfe straightened. "Her name?" I don't know it. Not fully. She went by Evelyn. She attended with a theatrical producer named Linton Vale. I filed that name in the mental drawer reserved for people who might ruin my lunch." Renard continued. "They were arguing about a script, something she claimed he mishandled. It caused a scene. People noticed." "And you?" Wolfe asked. "I spoke to her briefly. She was distressed, but alive." His voice dropped. "When I read the news this morning, the police will want to talk to everyone who interacted with her. My name is attached to several philanthropic ventures. I cannot risk scandal or blackmail." I tilted my head. "Anybody blackmailing you now?" "No," he said too quickly, which of course meant possibly yes. "That's unconvincing," I said. "If we charged extra for dubious denials, you'd be a premium client." Wolfe aimed a heavy frown at me. "Archie." "What? If he interrupts digestion, he should pay for it." "You interrupt digestion merely by existing." Renard blinked, unsure whether to flee or pay us both. "Mr. Wolfe, I swear I had nothing to do with her death." "If you lie," Wolfe said, folding his hands across the equator of his stomach, "I shall withdraw immediately, and I will not refund any portion of my fee. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Then you will deposit $10,000, cashier's check or certified." Wolfe paused. "You will also provide a complete account of your interactions with this woman. No omissions." Renard hesitated only long enough to seem human. I brought my checkbook." "That will not suffice," Wolfe said. "Fritz will prepare a receipt. You may return within 2 hours with an acceptable instrument." Renard stood. Of course. He paused at the archway. "If you uncover anything at all, please tell me before you tell anyone else." "That depends on the shape of the facts," Wolfe said. The moment he left, I leaned back. 10,000, I said. "Nice haul for a morning where I haven't even finished my coffee." "This man," Wolfe said, "is withholding information. Did you note his pupils and his reaction when you mentioned blackmail?" "I did. He practically jumped like a startled gazelle." "Gazelles," Wolfe murmured. Have better posture. I grinned. So, Renard's dirty? No, Wolfe said, not yet, but he is oily. A statement I couldn't dispute. I picked up my notebook and clicked the pen. So what's the plan? First, he said, you will type a summary of your nocturnal misadventure. Include every detail: the taxi, the woman, her behaviour, the chit. Second, you will prepare a dossier on Renard and this theatrical producer, Vale. I nodded. Sure. Anything else? Yes. At 10 tomorrow, when Inspector Kramer calls, I will speak with him. You expecting fireworks? No, Wolfe said, but I anticipate sparks. He closed his eyes, not asleep, but in contemplation. It was his way of turning the world down so he could think at full volume. I stood, stretched, and made for my desk. As I sat and rolled a fresh sheet of paper into the typewriter, I couldn't help smiling. The case had crossed the threshold and Wolfe had taken the wheel, figuratively, since he wouldn't be caught dead in a taxi. As my fingers hit the keys, the bell cord behind me jingled softly. Wolfe spoke without opening his eyes. Archie, do try to be accurate. When am I not? He opened his eyes. You desire examples. Never mind, I said, typing now. I got 3 lines in before Fritz appeared silently again. Lunch is ready, gentlemen. Wolfe rose with a dignity usually reserved for royalty or large cats. Very well, Archie, we shall resume after lunch. Of course, I said. Wouldn't want the investigation to interfere with the quiche. He didn't dignify that with a reply. The Hamilton Crown Club was the kind of place that made you feel underdressed even if you were wearing your best intentions. By the time I stepped out of the elevator into their penthouse reception, I had already counted 3 men whose cufflinks were worth more than my whole wardrobe and 1 woman whose perfume probably had its own line of credit. The air smelled of bourbon, cigars, damp wool coats, and the faint, sour trace of money that had been worked too hard in the wrong direction. A liveried attendant with shoulders like a freight truck and a face like an underpaid butler gave me the slow once-over. I was in a decent suit, the tie that Wolfe grudgingly called passable, and shoes that had seen better sidewalks than the ones outside last night's taxi adventure. Still, I knew I wasn't their usual brand of guest. May I help you, sir? He inquired in the same tone you'd use to ask if an insect needed directions. You may, I said. My name's Archie Goodwin. I'm here to chat about a dead woman and a membership chit. I understand you people are big on both exclusivity and paper. That got a blink. Not much, but enough to prove he was alive. If you have business with the club, you will need to speak with Mr. Lyle. Splendid. The sooner the better. Lead on, Jeeves. His mouth tightened just enough to show he had heard of humour and disapproved of it. He guided me through a corridor that was doing its best impression of a country estate. Walnut panelling lined the walls, crimson carpets swallowed the sound of our steps, and portraits of theatrical patrons stared down, looking like they'd sue you for humming the wrong tune from the wrong show. We emerged into the main lounge, a spacious room filled with low conversation, clinking glasses, and the soft rustle of money pretending not to be money. Men in tailored suits clustered around small tables, a few women in evening dresses that hadn't gotten the memo about daytime sat near the windows, smoking like it was a competitive sport. A bar gleamed at one end, attended by a bartender whose hair was slicked back with something that could probably waterproof a battleship. My escort left me at a door to an inner office and knocked. A voice called, "Yes?" We stepped inside. Horace Lyle, club manager, looked exactly like you'd cast if you needed club manager who knows too much for a stage play. Tall, thin, hair parted with mathematical precision, he wore a dark suit and a tie that knew it was important. His desk was larger than it needed to be, the better to support his sense of responsibility. "Yes?" he repeated, then added, seeing me. "You are?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "I represent Nero Wolfe. You may have heard of him. He's the one Manhattan suspect when the police start looking nervous." Lyle's eyes cooled a few degrees. "We are a private club, Mr. Goodwin. We are not in the habit of entertaining investigators." "You entertained a corpse in a taxi chit last night, courtesy of one of your members' friends," I said. "That kind of habit can grow on you." "I don't know what you're referring to." "Her name was Evelyn Harrow," I said. "At least that's what I'm told. She attended a fundraiser here last night. She left alive. Later, she wasn't." His gaze flickered. It was quick, but not quick enough. This is a delicate institution, he said. We value discretion. And I value not being used as a hearse, I said. We all have our quirks. I need to speak with anyone who saw her here last night. I'm starting with you, because your desk is the biggest. He hesitated, then gestured stiffly toward a chair. Sit down, Mr. Goodwin. I cannot allow this to become a scandal. That makes two of us. I already have more than my share of notoriety. It clashes with my tie. He didn't smile. Some people just refuse to cooperate. Very well, he said. Miss Harrow was a guest here. She arrived with Mr. Linton Vale, a producer. They attended the fundraiser, stayed for some time, and left. That is all I know. I shook my head. Come on, Mr. Lyle. This place runs on gossip the way cabs run on gasoline. You saw something. It is not my job to observe private quarrels. But you do it anyway, I said. What kind of scene did they make? His jaw twitched. There was an argument. Brief. Miss Harrow raised her voice regarding a manuscript. She accused Mr. Vale of mishandling it. He told her not to embarrass him in public. They went to the smaller lounge to continue privately. I did not follow. Of course not, I said. You had your hands full not observing. He cleared his throat. We are a respectable institution. Sure, and I'm the quiet type. He picked up a pen and rolled it between his fingers. I must insist that the name of this club not be mentioned in any public record, Mr. Goodwin. That depends on whether anyone here helped her stay alive or helped her stop, I said. We can cooperate, or we can practice our scowls at each other while the police issue subpoenas. His lips thinned. There is no need to be theatrical. Funny you say that, I replied, because my next stop is a theatrical producer. Is Linton Vale here? He is in the reading room, Lyle admitted, but I must ask that you— Don't worry, I said. I'll use my inside voice. On my way out of his office, I paused by a coat rack bearing a lineup of expensive outerwear. I studied one of the coats with exaggerated seriousness. Tell me, I said to it, did you see Miss Harrow leave last night, or were you too busy shedding rain? The coat rack stayed mum. So did the coats. Lyle behind me made a strangled noise. Mr. Goodwin, this is highly inappropriate. I turned. You're right. This coat refuses to answer questions. I'll stick to the humans. That wasn't a red herring exactly, but it was something for him to chase mentally while I moved on. The reading room was quieter, panelled in darker wood, with shelves of leather-bound volumes that had probably never met a fingerprint. Men sat in deep chairs, pretending to read while actually perfecting their bored expressions. At a table near the window, a man of about 50, with a thick mane of greying hair and a suit that said, "Successful but not modest," was scribbling notes on a pad. He had the air of someone who expected the world to applaud when he cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, I asked. He looked up. Yes. Archie Goodwin, I said. I'm here about Evelyn Harrow. For a second the pen froze in his hand. Then he set it down with studied calm. I was wondering when someone would come. Consider your wondering concluded, I said, taking the chair opposite. Tell me about last night. She brought me a script, he said. His voice had the resonance of a man used to projecting to the cheap seats. A manuscript, really. She claimed it contained proof of fraud in one of my productions. And does it? He snorted. It contains proof of her vanity, primarily. She fancied herself an investigator of the theatre's underbelly. She misunderstood conversations, misread accounts, drew wild conclusions. It was a mess. Soap bubble red herring. The implication that she was just a deluded scribbler, and we could all go home. He was pushing it hard. So, you weren't worried? I asked. I was annoyed, he corrected. She accused one of my investors of diverting funds, which is serious, yes, but her evidence amounted to misconstrued ledger entries and hearsay. I told her to revise it or drop it. That sounds gentle for a man rumoured to throw librettos at directors, I said. His eyes narrowed. Rumours exaggerate. Sometimes, I agreed. Sometimes they understudy the truth. He leaned back. We argued. She was agitated. I suggested she cool off and bring me something that wouldn't get her sued for libel. She left. That's the last I saw of her. She didn't mention the Hamilton Crown Club to you? I asked. We were in the Hamilton Crown Club, he said dryly. I mean the club in connection with her investigation. He hesitated. She implied some members here were involved. She wouldn't name names until I read the entire manuscript. I refused. "Do you have it?" I asked. "The manuscript?" "No." He spread his hands. She took it with her. I assumed she would try to sell it elsewhere, or burn it. She had a flair for drama. If you're looking for a motive for murder, you might try someone whose reputation she targeted. Mine is resilient. "Flair for drama, huh?" I said. "Funny, the way she died in the back of my taxi didn't seem staged." "She died?" he said, eyes widening. "I didn't know. The morning papers only said a woman was found dead. They didn't give a name." "Now you know," I said. He stared past me at the window for a moment, then shook his head. "That's unfortunate. She was difficult, but she didn't deserve that." "Most people don't," I said. "But here we are." I left him to his notes and ego and went hunting for the club secretary. Secretaries in places like this are more dangerous than the managers. They touch the paperwork. Marjorie Kelton had a small office near the administrative wing, with a desk that looked efficient and a filing cabinet that looked smug. She was in her 30s, dark hair pinned neatly, glasses perched on her nose like they were proud of the view. When I introduced myself, she didn't blink. "You're here about Miss Harrow," she said. "I wondered when someone would come." "That line's getting popular," I said. "You people should coordinate your scripts." She ignored that. "What do you need to know?" "Let's start with why she was in the private ledger room last night," I said. "Without permission." Marjorie's lips tightened. "Because she ignored my instructions and went where she shouldn't. She asked me where we keep our investment records. I told her those are confidential and for authorized personnel only. She pretended to accept that. 10 minutes later, I found her in the ledger room, leafing through the books." "What did she say?" I asked. "She claimed she was verifying something for Mr. Vale," Marjorie said. "I told her to get out. She left. I reported the incident to Mr. Lyle." "And he did what? Wrote a stern memo?" "I assume he spoke to Mr. Vale," she said. "It is not my place to speculate." "That's everyone's favourite pastime around here," I said. "You sure you want to miss out?" Her gaze sharpened. "Mr. Goodwin, I am not accustomed to being mocked in my own office." "It's not your office I'm mocking," I said. "It's the idea that a woman walks into your private ledgers, snoops, and all that happens is a verbal shooing. You didn't call security?" "She left," Marjorie said. "And we are not a prison. We are a club." "Some would argue the difference is academic," I muttered. I let my eyes wander, as if casually. On a side table lay a thick membership ledger, its cover worn but dignified. When Marjorie's phone buzzed and she turned to answer it, I moved closer. From the angle of the book, a page near the middle stuck out a fraction further than the rest. I flipped it open with a fingertip. There, toward the back, was a rough edge where a page had been torn out. The gap matched, in size and shape, the torn chit that had ridden in Evelyn's evening bag. I didn't remove anything. I just looked, noted, and placed the book back exactly as I'd found it. Originals are for the police. I collect impressions. "Is there a problem?" Marjorie asked, ending the call. "Just admiring the penmanship," I said. "You must have strong wrists." "If you're implying something, only that your ledgers are missing a page," I said, "and that Miss Harrow had a torn fragment of Crown Club stationery. Seems like a bad season for paper around here." Her fingers tightened on a pencil until I wondered if it would snap. "I was not aware of any missing page." "Now you are," I said. "You might want to mention it to Mr. Lyle before the police mention it to you." She swallowed. "We have no interest in obstructing justice." "Good," I said, "because justice gets cranky when obstructed, almost as cranky as my employer when lunch is delayed." As if the mention had conjured him, my pocket buzzed. It was 12:24 by my watch. Orchid hours were over. Lunch was coming. Wolfe, therefore, was awake and dangerous. I stepped into the corridor and answered. "Goodwin." "Where are you?" Wolfe demanded. His voice had that special edge it reserved for moments when I was not where he wanted me to be. "In a temple dedicated to bourbon, cigars, and creative bookkeeping," I said. "The Hamilton Crown Club. I'm making friends." "Phooey," he said. "Your peregrinations jeopardize the dignity of this establishment." "On the contrary," I said. "I wore my best tie. Our dignity is intact." "There is a client here," he said, over my frivolity. "A man with impertinent urgency and, I suspect, money. You will return at once. I refuse to squander my time placating the excitable while you gad about among dilettantes." Don't worry, I said. I've almost finished insulting the decor. I found a torn page in their membership ledger that might have been cousins with our taxi chit, and a secretary who'd like to shred me more than the paper. I'll bring my report and my charming personality. Bring your brain, Wolfe said. The rest is optional. Touching, I said. I'm on my way. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, took one last look at the club lounge with its crimson carpet and secrets, and headed for the elevator. Somewhere between the walnut panelling and the portraits, a dead woman's manuscript and a missing ledger page were doing a duet. If Wolfe's new client had anything to add to the tune, we were about to hear a more interesting melody. As the elevator doors slid shut, I smiled to myself. Wolfe had taken the wheel now, figuratively speaking. My job was just to bring him the map, and hope he didn't throw it at my head. The woman sitting in Wolfe's office looked like she'd been sculpted for the part of grief with good posture, and she was determined to deliver her lines without cracking. I've seen distraught relatives before, but Verena Harrow had that particular brand of anguish that came wrapped in self-control, the way society ladies wrap gifts in too much ribbon to hide that the box is shaking. She sat on the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk, hands folded tightly, eyes a little too bright. Her black suit was tailored and severe. Her hat, small and tasteful, suggested she wanted attention only from the right people. Her lipstick was the kind that stayed put long after the truth didn't. Wolfe regarded her with the same expression he might give a rare orchid that had decided to bloom out of spite. He wasn't buying anything she was selling, not yet. My sister, she said, was being blackmailed. Her voice was smooth, but each word carried a tiny fracture. She looked at me first, checking for sympathy maybe, then quickly shifted to Wolfe as if she knew he was the one who had to be convinced. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Miss Harrow or Mrs.? Miss, she said. Verena Harrow, Evelyn's older sister. I nodded politely. You have our condolences. She nodded without acknowledging mine. I know you don't take many clients, Mr. Wolfe, but I need protection. Someone is trying to destroy my family's name. They used Evelyn, and they may now try to use me. Wolfe's brows lifted a fraction. Your sister's death was a crime. The police will pursue the perpetrator. Yes, she said too quickly. But the police may misinterpret things. They might think I had reason to silence her. Her gaze flicked down. The mask slipped for half a second. We weren't estranged, not really. We simply lived apart. I leaned forward. You told Fritz on the phone that you two were close. She tightened. Close in spirit. Oh, that's so, I said. Funny. Most sisters who are close know what the other one did for a living. Wolfe cut me a look. Not sharp enough to slice, but enough to remind me to let the woman twist at her own pace. Verena swallowed. Evelyn never discussed her work. That must have been difficult, I said lightly, since she also apparently never had any. Her eyes darted to me. What do you mean? You said just now she never wrote anything. I kept my tone mild. But there was quite a fuss at the Hamilton Crown Club about a manuscript she delivered. A script, I'm told. Loud voices, disagreements. People noticed. She blanched just enough to confirm she'd stepped in wet concrete. I meant, she never published anything. She dabbled. All amateurs dabble. No, I said. Most amateurs don't dabble in documents that cause producers to blow gaskets. Wolfe inhaled deeply, the sound of a man preparing to unfurl displeasure. Miss Harrow, circumstances compel candour. I will not serve as an unwitting accomplice to obfuscation. You came here seeking sanctuary, not indulgence. Thus, you will be exact. She pressed a hand to her throat. Mr. Wolfe, I am telling the truth. Someone at that club, perhaps Renard, perhaps Vale, was blackmailing my sister. She told me as much. I cocked an eyebrow. When? Recently, she said. Too vague, too convenient. Wolfe, who detested imprecision more than sin, leaned back. Miss Harrow, you insist you and your sister were close, yet you know little of her life. You claim she never wrote, yet you know of a manuscript. You profess ignorance of her troubles, yet somehow possess detailed knowledge of blackmail. Her composure cracked. A sheen of panic glossed her eyes. She stopped, looked down, then up again with a desperation that felt less like emotion and more like calculation failing. All right, I'll tell you everything. Wolfe's eyelids lowered in approval. Proceed. Evelyn, she began, wrote exposés, secret ones. She ghost wrote for society patrons, women who wanted to expose corrupt financiers, crooked producers, dishonest philanthropists, but without attaching their own names. Anonymous slander, Wolfe said coolly. No, she said quickly. Not slander. Truths that would topple reputations, things people needed to know. I nodded at Wolfe. Sounds like the kind of thing that gets you blackmailed or murdered. Verena flinched. Yes. Evelyn said someone at the Crown Club warned her to stop writing. A note. A threat. A note written on what? I asked. She hesitated. One beat too long. Stationery. Club stationery. Wolfe's voice dropped a degree. A detail you should not know, unless you saw the note. She froze. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Wolfe's head. Miss Harrow, he said, you must understand. Deception lessens the possibility of success. One more concealment, and I withdraw entirely. That did it. Her shoulders sagged like strings cut from a marionette. All right, she whispered. I saw the note. I took it from her apartment 2 nights ago. I didn't want the police to think she was paranoid. Paranoid is forgivable, I said. Dead with enemies is less so. She rubbed her forehead. I knew if the police found that note, they would assume Evelyn had gotten involved with criminals, and then they would look at me. They always look at the surviving family. They think we know everything. In your case, I said, that might someday be true if you keep talking. Wolfe shot me a look of disapproval that carried, beneath it, a faint filigree of amusement. Protectiveness, Wolfe style. Verena pressed forward. Mr. Wolfe, please. I'm not lying about the blackmail. Evelyn said someone threatened to expose her for writing the exposés. She wouldn't tell me who, but she was frightened. Truly frightened. Wolfe drummed his fingers once, a quiet warning shot. The truth, Miss Harrow, not dramatics. I saw my opening. Also, I added brightly, our retainer includes a small surcharge for melodrama. 15% on tears, 20 if you clutch your pearls. Verena looked shocked. Wolfe looked appalled. Phooey, he said. Must you? Yes, I said, I must. Before Verena could decide whether to faint or fight, the phone rang. I crossed the room and picked up. Goodwin, I said. Archie. Inspector Kramer's voice sounded like a bulldog forced to apologize. Put Wolfe on. One moment. I covered the receiver. Kramer, I said. Wolfe extended a hand. I placed the phone in it like I was handing over a grenade. Yes, Inspector, Wolfe said, voice smooth as aged whiskey. We got the autopsy, Kramer said. Your dead woman, Harrow, she was poisoned. Fast-acting alkaloid, likely swallowed at the club before Goodwin drove her anywhere. I glanced at Verena. Her face went sheet white. Poison, Wolfe repeated. Yeah, Kramer said. And Goodwin is officially off the hook. He didn't give it to her, didn't help her swallow it, and didn't hinder her dying. The DA accepts that. Well, I muttered, I'm honoured. Kramer continued. Wolfe, don't play dumb. Poison in a high-end club means someone planned it. We're running down the service staff, bartenders, coat check, the works. But we need you two to stay out of trouble. Wolfe made a soft noise. Not agreement, not disagreement. Inspector, we will not obstruct justice. That's as close to friendly as you get, Kramer grumbled. All right, keep us updated. He hung up. Wolfe replaced the phone in its cradle. Poison, Verena whispered. Her voice was smaller now, stripped of artifice. Then she was murdered at the club. Wolfe nodded once, indisputably. She looked at him, then at me. Please, Mr. Wolfe, find who did this. Wolfe studied her quietly. If he'd been a wolf in a past life, and sometimes I wondered, this was the look he gave prey before deciding whether to bite or merely intimidate. Miss Harrow, he said at last, you will provide every document, every scrap of writing, every memory of your sister's work. No omissions. She nodded quickly. I will. And, he added, you will refrain from destroying further evidence, misleading authorities, or indulging in theatrics. If you fail, even once, I shall dismiss you. I swear, she said. I didn't believe her. But Wolfe allowed it, and Wolfe's allowance carries more weight than my suspicions. He lifted his hand toward me, a signal I knew well. Archie, he said, a beer. Now, that meant something. Wolfe never offered me beer before lunch unless there was meaning behind it, and the meaning was he was relieved I hadn't been poisoned by proximity. I crossed to the dining room doorway where Fritz had appeared, silently as always, with a tray. He had anticipated Wolfe's signal, as if the brownstone itself communicates before we speak. Wolfe accepted his glass with solemnity. I accepted mine with gratitude. "Miss Harrow," Wolfe said after a sip, "you may return at 3 with the documents." She rose, shaky but trying not to show it. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, truly." As she reached the door, I said, "And remember, 20% if you swoon." Wolfe closed his eyes and exhaled a monumental pfui. The morning Saul Panzer walked into the office. The air in the brownstone shifted the way it does when a man enters who notices more in 10 seconds than most people do in 10 years. Saul doesn't make an entrance. He simply materializes, the way a good operative ought to. His flat cap was tipped low, his eyes steady, and his coat carried the faint scent of rain and subway iron. Wolfe nodded at him, which from Wolfe is the equivalent of embracing someone and naming a child after them. "Saul, thank you for coming." Saul returned the nod. "Archie said it was important." "It is," Wolfe replied. "A manuscript, rumoured, possibly dangerous. You will find it, or any trace of where it has gone." Saul settled into the red chair. "Tell me what we know." So I did. Brief, sharp, the way Saul likes it. Blackmail, the Crown Club, Verena Harrow's tears and lies, the missing ledger page, the poisoned sister, and the whisper of a manuscript with claws. Saul rubbed his thumb along his jaw. "All right, I'll follow the paper trail. Meanwhile, Archie should check the apartment." "That," Wolfe said, swivelling his gaze at me, "is precisely the task at hand." I saluted him. "Yes, sir, I'll bring back anything that isn't bolted down." "Bring back only facts," he corrected, "and do not antagonize anyone unnecessarily." "Isn't that the whole point of field work?" I asked. He closed his eyes, which meant he was sparing language the indignity of responding. Evelyn Harrow's apartment was in a modest but ambitious building off West End Avenue, one of those places where the radiators thump, the stairs creak, and the tenants pretend the rent isn't eating them alive. I buzzed the landlord, who had the voice of a man more used to evictions than greetings. "Who is it?" "Archie Goodwin, investigating the death of your tenant, Miss Harrow." "5th floor," he grunted, offering no condolences but plenty of suspicion. The hallway on the 5th floor smelled faintly of boiled cabbage, last night's radio dramas, and lives lived too close to their neighbours. Evelyn's door was locked, but not enough to stop someone with training and good intentions. I let myself in. The apartment was stylish in a curated, not expensive way. Theatrical posters on the walls, shelves with plays, scripts, and dog-eared copies of Sondheim and Shaw. A typewriter sat on a small desk near the window, the platen still warm, which was peculiar since she'd been dead long enough for ink to dry and coffee to mould. A nosy neighbour appeared in the doorway of the hall, a woman in a bathrobe patterned with what might once have been flowers, hair pinned with mismatched clips. "You're not the landlord," she announced. "No," I said. "But don't worry. I don't collect rent. I only collect trouble." She frowned. "You with the police?" "No," I said. "Better dresser." She leaned closer. "You hear about Evelyn. Shame that. She had visitors, you know." "Visitors?" I echoed. "Plural?" She nodded theatrically. "A woman last night. Tall, red lipstick, too fancy for this building," they argued. "Did you hear what about?" "Oh no," she said, making it clear she absolutely tried. "They talked on the fire escape, whispered, but I know angry whispering when I hear it." I thanked her, gave her my card, and shut the door before she could start guessing plot twists. The clutter on Evelyn's desk looked normal enough at first glance. Pencils, carbon sheets, a fountain pen, and a typewriter with a ribbon that still shined faintly with fresh use. I rolled the platen carefully and saw the impressions of a page no longer present, the ghosts of words, the indentations of a story removed. I made a rubbing with paper and pencil, a neat trick Wolfe taught me back when I had far less patience. The impressions were faint but unmistakably page-shaped. Saul would be able to decipher more when he arrived. The trash bin held more promise. Crumpled sheets, torn notes, and near the bottom, a single carbon scrap with one phrase typed cleanly: "The Crown Conspiracy." A title dramatic enough to attract publishers, police, or poisoners. Then I found something more interesting. A cigarette stub in the ashtray. Bright red lipstick, the kind Verena didn't wear, and Evelyn didn't either. Someone else had been here, and recently. I pocketed the impressions and the carbon scrap. Not evidence, mind you, but notes. Originals remained untouched. A small card slipped halfway beneath the typewriter stand caught my eye next. A schedule card. 3 names, written in neat script. Val Renard K, just K. Someone who didn't need a full name to know who they were. I was still weighing whether K stood for killer in some dramatic flourish when the front door opened and Saul Panzer stepped inside. "You're getting slower," he said mildly. "I was letting the apartment warm up to me," I replied. "It's shy." He went straight to the typewriter, rolled the platen, and nodded. "Page impressions match the torn size of your ledger page." She typed something related to the Crown Club. "Good," I said. "You can help me translate the ghosts later." He picked up the carbon scrap. This title, she was working on something dangerous. "Or ambitious," I said. "Or both. Dangerous ambitions are a house specialty around here." Saul pocketed only the notes he'd written. He never touched originals, then gave the apartment one last sweep. "Anything else, Baz?" he asked. "Plenty," I said. A lipstick stub from a woman who wasn't Evelyn, a nosy neighbour claiming tall lady visitor, and a schedule card listing Vale, Renard, and a mysterious K. He nodded. "Kelton," he said. "Marjorie Kelton, club secretary." I conceded the point. "Wolfe will like that one." "He'll want details," Saul said. "Be ready." "Details," I said. "My middle name." "That's not what Wolfe calls you," he replied, and slipped out. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office with his head tilted back, eyes closed. Not sleeping, but thinking in that way he does where the air seems to thicken with contemplation. I gave him the whole report. He held up a hand. No embellishments. "You wound me," I said. "I only embellish on special occasions." "Proceed," he said. So I did. Landlord, nosy neighbour, typewriter impressions, lipstick stub, schedule card. When I reached the part about the neighbour's robe, I may have coloured it a bit, paisley dragons, or possibly sea monsters, but Wolfe cut me off. "Archie, do not torment language or me." "Oh, come on, if you'd seen it." "Archie," I sighed. "Fine. Beige and floral, a crime in itself." He leaned forward. "This manuscript, the Crown Conspiracy, an exposé, potentially explosive, and the missing page shapes match the ledger leaf." "Meaning someone removed something she typed and someone removed something from the ledger," I said. "Same paper size, same motive?" "Possibly," Wolfe murmured, "but conjecture is premature." "Premature conjecture," I agreed, "is the spice of life." Before Wolfe could inform me of what he thought of my seasoning metaphors, the doorbell rang. Fritz went to answer it. A moment later he returned with a soft cough. "Inspector Kramer, sir." Kramer entered with the posture of a man who's been awake too long and working too hard. He had a cigar jammed between his fingers, unlit, a rare sign he was too tired even to smoke. "Wolfe," he grunted. "Goodwin." "Inspector," Wolfe said politely, which was unwelcome courtesy from his perspective. Kramer dropped into the red chair like gravity had doubled. "All right, I need something from you." "That is both usual and regrettable," Wolfe replied. Kramer cut him a look. "Spare me. You know that manuscript is floating around somewhere, and if it surfaces in the wrong hands, we're going to be cleaning up the mess for a year. If it shows up, I want it, immediately." Wolfe folded his hands. "If it appears, and only if its integrity is intact, and only if it does not imperil my client, you will be informed. Promptly." "Promptly," Kramer repeated. "I'll take it." "On one condition," Wolfe added. Kramer's jaw tightened. "What now?" "Keep Vale from leaving town." Kramer snorted. "Already done. He's under shadow. He won't sneeze without a report." I made a note. Wolfe nodded once, the rarest gesture of agreement between two men constitutionally opposed to agreeing. Kramer pushed himself up. "All right, Wolfe. I'll wait for your report." When he'd gone, Wolfe exhaled a long, slow breath. "Archie, beer." "Thought you'd never ask." Fritz appeared with 2 chilled glasses, punctual as sunrise in Switzerland. Wolfe handed me one without comment. He didn't say it, but this was his way of saying he needed me thinking clearly, fortified, steady. and also that someone had tried to kill my passenger with poison, and Wolfe would be damned before he let that cloud his house. I took a long sip. Here's to manuscripts that shouldn't exist. Wolfe harumphed. Phooey. But he drank. If there's one thing I don't like about being summoned to a murder scene, it's the timing. And this one came at the exact moment I was negotiating a peaceful afternoon with a sandwich. The phone rang. I answered, and Inspector Kramer's voice growled through the line like a bulldog with dental grievances. "Goodwin," he said, "get down to the Hamilton Crown Club, now. And don't make me regret calling you." When have I ever? Now? Click. 5 minutes later, I was in a cab headed uptown, wondering which deity liked to schedule corpses whenever I planned lunch. The club's entrance was a whirlpool of uniforms, shouting members, and one patrolman attempting to keep the hysterics from climbing the drapes. Inside, chaos had taken a lease. Men in tuxedos yelled accusations across walnut paneling. Staff whispered at a pitch that could shatter glass, and the air tasted like cigar smoke and guilt. Kramer spotted me first. He jabbed his cigar in my direction. "Goodwin, over here." I threaded through the crowd to the ledger room, where the commotion had its epicenter. Stebbins stood guard at the door, arms crossed, jaw clenched hard enough to crack walnuts. "You break it, you buy it, Goodwin," he grunted. "I'll leave the breaking to you," I answered, and slipped inside. Linton Vale was on the floor, half-sprawled against a mahogany desk, looking stunned in the way only dead men do. The antique letter opener, a gold-handled monstrosity usually mounted on the wall, was buried neatly in his torso. Someone had a sense of symmetry. Kramer took out the unlit cigar he never seemed to remember to light. There he is, stabbed, in a locked room more or less. I knelt beside the body, not touching, just observing. His dinner plate sat on a nearby credenza untouched, steak cooling sadly. I glanced at it. "If you don't mind," I said, "investigation strengthens appetite." Kramer's eyes widened. "Sit down at a crime victim's dinner, and I'll have you arrested myself." "So, not allowed?" I asked. Stebbins snorted. "Sit, and I'll help him." I sighed and stood. Kramer handed me a small folded paper, found in his pocket. The handwriting was sharp, angry strokes. "You destroyed her. Now the ledger destroys you." "Ledger," I murmured. "Cute." "Nothing cute about it," Kramer muttered. "Look around." I did. The club ledger, which should have sat proudly on its pedestal, was open and missing a page entirely. Not torn recently. Torn earlier, cleanly, like a dentist removing a tooth with skill and motive. "Same size as the chit Evelyn Harrow carried," I said. Kramer nodded grimly. "So someone didn't just kill Harrow. Someone wanted records erased." Club manager Horace Lyle hovered near the door, wringing his hands like he was testing them for squeaks. "Inspector, this is a tragedy for the entire establishment." "Save it," Kramer barked. "When did you last see Vale alive?" Lyle swallowed. "At dinner." He excused himself to review some paperwork. "Alone?" I assume so. I wasn't policing his movements. His eyes drifted toward the ledger pedestal. Guilty or scared, the line was thin in this place. I spotted Marjorie Kelton, club secretary, standing stiff with fear or fury. "Miss Kelton," I said, "you were the last known person caught guarding this ledger room. Anything to share?" She stiffened. "I guard the room. I don't guard grown men who enter it." "A pity," I said. "You could have saved yourself some trouble." Kramer jabbed his cigar at me. "Goodwin, save the sass. I called you because, God help me, Wolfe may see angles we don't. But you're sharing everything. Understood?" "Perfectly," I said. "We're in détente, no sabotage." Kramer grunted. "Fine, but don't let Wolfe play games." I gave him a wide grin. "He doesn't play games. He conducts wars." Stebbins scowled. "Comforting." While they canvassed staff, I examined the mahogany desk Vale had been using. One drawer stuck out slightly. I knelt, opened it, and found a hidden compartment, amateurishly concealed, the way guilty men hide chocolates or illicit ledgers. Inside were envelopes labeled with member initials and figures that didn't match the club's official books. Payments, uneven, suspicious. Blackmail or embezzlement. I'd bet Wolfe's next beer on it. I replaced everything carefully. Originals stay with the police. "Inspector," I said, straightening, "your victim had extracurricular bookkeeping." Kramer looked, and his mouth tightened. "Hell, this'll blow the DA's eyebrows off." Lyle paled. Kelton went rigid. The air grew thick enough to spread on toast. Kramer exhaled, defeated but determined. All right. Goodwin, tell Wolfe everything. Everything. And keep your nose where I can smell it. I'll send him a report scented with musk, I said. No extra charge. Kramer pointed his cigar at the exit. Get out before I remember I dislike you. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe received the news the way a king receives word that someone used his throne as a footstool. Murder, he thundered, softly, because Wolfe thunders with restraint. Another murder. Confound these dilettantes who use death as punctuation. He slammed his palm on the desk. Not loudly, but with the authority of a man who reserves outrage for structural injustices and poorly prepared omelettes. I dropped into my chair. At least it means we're on the right trail. It means, Wolfe growled, that someone is escalating in panic. Panic creates sloppiness. Sloppiness produces danger. For you, Archie. That last part came out sharper than intended. Protectiveness, Wolfe style. I would have smirked, but the mood wasn't ideal. I'll stay sharp, I assured him. You will stay alive, he corrected. I gave him a salute, as ordered. Then, because we needed it, I added, good news is Vale didn't get to eat his steak. There might be leftovers. Wolfe glared at me with enough disdain to season an entire banquet. I leaned back, hands behind my head. Don't worry, I left it there. Stebbins would have tackled me. Wolfe shut his eyes, pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, Phooey. When Saul Panzer decides to appear, he does it the way Dawn does. Quiet, inevitable, and with the faint suggestion that he's been watching you sleep for the past hour. He stepped into Wolfe's office without a sound, flat cap low, expression unreadable. I have it, he said simply. Wolfe, who had been pretending to enjoy the last 5 minutes before orchid time, opened his eyes. Proceed. Saul handed me a small notepad, his handwriting neat, economical. Evelyn Harrow sold a sealed envelope about 2 hours before she died. She met a woman behind the Crown Club on the service alley. The buyer paid cash. I traced the messenger who witnessed it. And the buyer? I asked. Saul adjusted his cap. Marjorie Kelton. Wolfe grunted, which from him is the equivalent of a cymbal crash. The secretary. The same, Saul said. She left with the envelope and went straight to her apartment. I stretched my legs. All right, I'll go rattle her curtains. Wolfe's voice sharpened. Take care, Miss Kelton is not a fool. Neither, I said, am I. Wolfe gave me a look suggesting the jury was still out. The Hamilton Crown Club offices were less chaotic today. No fresh corpses, which always calms a room, but the tension in the wallpaper could have been ironed flat. I found Marjorie Kelton in her small office, typing like the fate of the free world depended on her WPM. She didn't look up. Mr. Goodwin, the police are done here. Good, I said. I'm not the police. That, she replied tightly, is what concerns me. She finally looked up, and her eyes were cold enough to chill the ink in her typewriter ribbon. What do you want? Oh, just a friendly chat, I said, about manuscripts, envelopes, back-alley purchases, the usual. Her fingers froze on the keys. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, that's awkward, I said, leaning casually against the filing cabinet. Because Saul Panzer does. A tiny bead of sweat formed at her temple. She had the expression of someone who had been told the magician's hat contained a tiger after all. I don't, Miss Kelton, I said in my most helpful tone. Saul saw the witness, saw the path, saw you. When Saul sees something, the only thing left is whether you admit it now or later in front of Kramer. Personally, I recommend now. Her facade cracked like a dropped dish. She sank back in her chair, exhaling sharply. All right, yes, I bought the envelope. Atta girl, I said. Why? She closed her eyes. To protect Philip. Renard, I asked. The fiancé? She nodded stiffly. Yes. Evelyn's manuscript. It implicated him. It portrayed him as a financial manipulator, someone who used his club connections for illegal gain. It exaggerated, twisted things. I couldn't let that get out. It would ruin him. I pulled over a chair. So you bought it? Then what? I hid it, she said, in my apartment. And that's the whole manuscript. No, she said quickly. Evelyn said she was missing one final page, a keystone page. Without it, the exposé didn't hold together. Do you have that page? No, Kelton said, voice rising. I never saw it. Evelyn said someone else had it. She wouldn't say who. I studied her. You realize Renard didn't exactly mention being the star villain of Evelyn's tell-all. She swallowed. He didn't know she wrote about him. Not until recently. He thought Vale was blackmailing him, that Vale wanted money to keep the exposé quiet. Which gives Renard motive, I pointed out, for murder number 1 or murder number 2. He didn't kill anyone, she snapped. Philip is many things, but not that. I tilted my head. You planning to marry him before or after prison? Her face flushed. You're insufferable. I get that a lot, I said, and I wear it proudly. Kelton squeezed her hands together. Mr. Goodwin, please. Philip didn't do this. Vale was the one squeezing him. And Evelyn was trying to protect someone too. She said the manuscript wasn't complete, that the keystone page was the only part she feared. Feared? I echoed. She nodded. She said it was dangerous, that it could topple more than just reputations. That, I noted, was exactly the sort of thing murderers take seriously enough to sharpen knives for. Kelton leaned forward. Please, help him. Help Philip. I stood. That depends on the truth. All of it. No edits. She nodded miserably. Before leaving, I paused in the doorway. One more thing. If Renard runs, I'll find him, and I'm faster than I look. She didn't laugh. I hadn't expected her to. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was at his desk, scowling at a dictionary, as if it had personally offended him. He looked up as I entered. Well? He demanded. I gave him the full report. Kelton's purchase, Renard's vulnerability, the missing keystone page, and the manuscript supposedly tucked somewhere safe. Wolfe listened, eyes half-lidded, fingers tapping lightly on the arm of his chair. When I finished, he let out a thoughtful growl. Keystone, he murmured. An apt metaphor. Something essential. Found or believed found. You think Vale had it, I said. I think, Wolfe replied, that someone believed he had it, which is enough to produce murder. That, I admitted, tracks. Wolfe fixed me with a stare. Your interview was adequate. Now, praise from Nero Wolfe comes in 3 flavors: non-existent, reluctant, and microscopic. Adequate puts you just below astonishing and light years above phooey. Well, I said, I'll add it to my resume. He ignored that. This matter now narrows. Whoever possesses or fears that final page is the murderer. Or the next victim, I said. Wolfe frowned. That too. Fritz appeared at the doorway with a tray of coffee, for me, and Wolfe's afternoon beverage. He set them down with the reverence of a priest. I lifted my cup. To women behind curtains. Wolfe glared. Archie, refrain from theatricality. Too late, I said. We're knee-deep in scripts. Wolfe closed his eyes. Phooey. The morning the Gazette decided Nero Wolfe was personally throttling the wheels of justice, I knew somebody had fed Lon Cohen a plate of bologna big enough to smother a horse. Lon's article wasn't malicious, but it was pointed. Anonymous sources at the Hamilton Crown Club claimed Wolfe was withholding crucial evidence. Anonymous sources, when translated, usually mean someone with a guilty conscience and a telephone. I tossed the paper onto Wolfe's desk. Congratulations. You've officially been upgraded from eccentric genius to public menace. Wolfe peered over the rim of his cup, scowling as if I'd served him vinegar. This, he said, is intolerable. He jabbed a finger at the headline. I have obstructed nothing. Lon didn't write it to spite you, I said. Someone whispered fiction into his ear. A club member, I'd bet. Probably one hoping you'd lose your temper and reveal whether we have the manuscript. I do not lose my temper, Wolfe said icily. I opened my mouth to comment, but was interrupted by the bell. Fritz appeared in the doorway a moment later. Inspector Kramer, sir. Kramer entered like a man carrying a burden he didn't like but couldn't put down. He wasn't furious, which was newsworthy in itself, but his shoulders were knotted tight. He waved the Gazette at Wolfe. Tell me, he said, that this is garbage. It is garbage, Wolfe replied. Kramer let out a grunt that could have been agreement. Good, Because I sure as hell didn't leak anything, and now half the city thinks you're sitting on dynamite. I do not confirm or deny possession of explosives, Wolfe said, metaphorical or otherwise. Kramer rubbed his forehead. Wolfe, I'm under pressure. The DA wants answers, the club wants quiet, the press wants blood, and Vale's killer wants time. He leaned forward. If you have the manuscript, tell me. I won't seize it. Wolfe's eyes cooled further. Inspector, when I ascertain truth, you will receive it, but I will not be manipulated by newspaper innuendo. Kramer stared at him for a long moment. For what it's worth, I believe you. The room quieted. Respect, like yeast, rises slowly. But then Kramer resumed his usual bark. Just keep me informed, Wolfe. I can't keep the DA off your back forever. You will keep him off as long as necessary, Wolfe said, because you want the murderer caught. Kramer gave a small, tired snort. Yeah, that too. He turned to leave, only to nearly collide with Saul Pantzer, who slipped in silently, holding a sealed evidence envelope. Inspector, Saul said politely. Kramer nodded, then eyed the envelope. What's that? Saul handed it to Wolfe. The keystone page, or what's left of it. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. You found it. City disposal depot, Saul said. Somebody tossed Evelyn's wastebasket before you got there. Lucky timing. I caught the truck before the load was flattened. Saul, I said, you're a treasure. He shrugged. I'm paid to be persistent. Wolfe opened the envelope with delicate fingers. Inside was a crumpled page typed in Evelyn Harrow's ribbon. Half the ink name at the bottom was smeared, deliberately, not by accident. Only fragments remained. Investment conduit through Crown Club accounts. R.D. Renard? I asked. Or Roland, or Rutherford, Kramer said. This isn't enough. No, Wolfe murmured. But the tampering is telling, Saul pointed at the corner of the paper. See the sheen? That isn't ordinary typewriter ink. It's theatrical ink, used to weather props or age documents. I whistled. Theatre ink, Vale's kingdom. Vale is dead, Kramer reminded us. Precisely, Wolfe said, meaning someone used his supplies to frame him or to cloud the trail. They wished to implicate Vale or hide behind his reputation. Kramer growled. So we're chasing a ghost. Not a ghost, Wolfe said. An actor. He meant it literally. Someone playing a part, constructing illusions. Kramer slumped into the red leather chair, an act he reserved for moments when professionalism battled exhaustion. Wolfe, I need clarity. Did Evelyn finish her exposé? Was Vale trying to bury it, or were they both being played? Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, thinking, calculating. Someone feared documentation, he said at last. They tampered with manuscripts, ledgers, and now public opinion. A pattern. Speaking of public opinion, I said, I'd like to put a bouncer at our door. The brownstone is invitation only, especially for storming detectives. Kramer glared. That's funny, Goodwin. It was meant to be, I said. He pushed himself up. Fine. I'll be back tomorrow. And Wolfe, if you get anything, you call me. Understood? Wolfe gave a regal incline of his head. Inspector, I shall. Kramer paused at the door and said, almost quietly, Don't make me regret trusting you. Then he was gone. Saul stayed behind while Wolfe examined the page under his desk lamp. The smudged signature, the deliberate sabotage, the theatrical ink, each detail carved deeper into Wolfe's concentration. This page, Wolfe said, was meant to mislead, not reveal. Then what does it tell us? I asked. That our murderer, Wolfe replied, understands staging. They choreograph events, they manipulate perception, they weaponize what is written, and they are running out of time. Saul nodded. I'll keep digging. Wolfe dismissed him gently. The closest Wolfe comes to gratitude. When Saul was gone, Wolfe pressed his fingertips together. Archie. Here, I said. We are being manoeuvred. Public opinion has been turned against us. Evidence has been altered. Investigators misled. And you hate being manoeuvred, I said. I despise it, he answered. He lifted the keystone page with a look that belonged in a courtroom. Find out who bought theatrical ink last month. That'll take some legwork, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Do it well. Which from him was more than an order. It was faith. And faith from Nero Wolfe is rarer than innocence at the Hamilton Crown Club.